So what we're going to talk about tonight is a bit of an introduction to bull evaluation, understanding your needs and how that informs what we should look for in a bull, understanding what different genetic selection tools are available, considering kind of value for money and budgeting for our bulls, and then some take-home messages. So first up, an introduction to bull evaluation. So to start off with, I thought I'd just introduce AgSights, the organization I work for. Some of you, as Katie mentioned in my bio, might be more familiar with AgSights under our original name, Bio or Beef Improvement Ontario. But since 1993, we've been a member cooperative that is involved in lots of different spaces in terms of agriculture data and capture and analytics. Genetic evaluation and performance evaluation services were our foundational service and remain very important to our organization today. In terms of performance evaluation, we've offered this service since 1991, and I did see some familiar names on the call tonight that have probably been testing bulls since right about the beginning there. We've tested over 60,000 animals. And we do have a flexible service. Some people just look at growth rates and growth evaluation. Some do ultrasound and some do both. Today we evaluate an ultrasound about 250 bulls within Ontario per year and then others in other jurisdictions as well. Performance evaluation has value for registered bulls and heifers. You can submit the data for your breed association EPDs. AgSights also produces our own crossbreed comparisons, or ABCs. And then we also offer a feedlot cattle ultrasound service, which you can use to actually sort your cattle for target markets. Bull tests are not a new concept, having existed since 1991, but because they've kind of fallen out of fashion in recent years, I thought I'd just give a quick refresher on what they are and what they do. So a bull test assesses the performance of a group of bulls under identical management. There's a few different options. You can do a home test on your own farm. You need at least 5 bulls per group to do that. Or you can send your bulls to a public test where they're compared and ranked relative to other breeders' bulls as well. I should mention, while bull evaluation is the topic of tonight's presentation, we do offer similar services for you to evaluate your heifers as well, if interested. Because all the bulls are treated and managed the exact same, they have the potential to live up to their genetic potential. And it does allow us to have rank bulls for selection. The traits that we consider do differ depending on the facilities or who's managing the test, but includes traits like growth, carcass quality, breeding soundness, and some tests even include feed intake as well. Some of you are likely familiar with the AgSights Bull Evaluation Report as shown on this screen. One thing we've been working on in collaboration with our partners in Quebec at PATBQ is actually modernizing these reports to meet the needs of today's bull buyers. So we're very excited this year for the first time to be launching our brand new end of test report format, which looks like this. So we really chose to go with a more visual representation of the data in the new report format. We also have developed some new selection indexes that breeders can use to help inform their selection decisions. And they're also customizable, so they can have pictures of the bulls, comments from the breeders, etc. on the new report. So all of the bull test reports that are publicly available are on our website, both current and previous. If you want to take a look, there's the link. And in the next couple of weeks, we'll be excited to release some of the brand new bull test reports for a couple of groups that are getting close to end of test. So why we should care about bull genetics is that in our typical cow herd where we're breeding our own replacements, 87.5% of the genetics in that herd are actually from the last 3 bulls used. So 50% from the sire, 25% from the grandsire, and 12.5% from the great grandsire. So it really doesn't take all that many generations for a high quality bull to make a big difference in your herd. Just as an example of what bull genetics can do, I took some results from the 2023 Maritime Bull Sale. We evaluated 122 bulls, again, largest bull test publicly in Canada. And we looked at the genetic differences between the top and the bottom bull in this group. So that difference was almost 60 pounds of weaning gain, just over 100 pounds of post-weaning gain, 1.32 inches of ribeye area, and 1.76 pounds per day of dry matter intake. And remember, those are the actual genetic differences. So what those bulls are going to pass on to their progeny, not just their own performance for those traits. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of variation between bulls available. And so we should do our best to use the tools we have available when we're making our decisions on which bull to select for our herd. Just to put kind of these numbers in perspective, looking kind of bigger picture, I took the numbers from the Maritime Bull Test Society and kind of assumed that everyone in Canada was using just an above average bull. So not top by any means, just above 50% bull. And what that actually could translate to in terms of additional efficiency in the beef sector is over 53 million pounds extra weight weaned per year, and a reduction of about 3 million pounds of feed saved in the post-weaning period. And of course, that would be beneficial for overall sector profitability, lower greenhouse gas emissions and resource utilization, and hopefully help increase the public acceptance of the Canadian beef sector. Switching gears now, let's talk about kind of the steps we take when we are buying a bull. So there's three kind of pieces to buying a bull. First, we need to consider our own operation and what we need. Then we should look at what tools and data we have available to make our decision. And finally, budgeting and actually deciding on that bull. The first step is actually understanding your own production system and what you actually need in a bull to advance your breeding goals. So when we think about our own herds, first of all, if we have a purebred registered herd, then we have different choices than if we have a commercial herd. If we do have a commercial herd, do we typically use the same breed of bull, which it seems like most tonight do, or do we rotate over time between different breeds? Again, that impacts where we need to look for our bull. We also want to consider mature weight and frame. That's important in terms of understanding what we need for calving ease for our bulls. Also our production system. So whether we're more intensive or extensive in production, when our calving season is, and what our market is. Are we just selling weaned calves, or are we retaining them through to finish? In that case, there's a different kind of characteristics we're looking for in our bull compared to just selling the weaned calves. And finally, benchmarking the current performance. So thinking about how the current calf crop is, what traits they're doing well at, and what traits we can improve, and using that in our wish list when we're coming up with deciding what type of a bull we need. There are a lot of different traits we can consider when we're selecting our bulls. Just some of them are on the list here. But really, what's important is determining what the economic value of each of those traits is to you. And nobody's going to have exactly the same breeding objective, even compared to your neighbor down the road. You might put a little bit more emphasis on things that make your everyday life easier because you have an off-farm job compared to your neighbor where that's their predominant form of income. So everything needs to be really considered within our own production system. Next, once we've got an idea of what we're looking for in a bull, we should start doing our homework and using these tools to help make a buying decision. So there's lots of different data typically we have available to us on sales catalogs or bull test reports. One of the common ones, of course, is growth performance for that bull calf. So I've taken a screenshot of our new bull test report here, where we have some different traits shown. and some average performances at the top. So the average weaning weight for this group was 791 pounds and adjusted 766 pounds. And because we are trying to present this quite visually, we've compared to a base of 0. So the bulls on the left that are below 0 had below average performance for that specific trait, and the ones on the right had above average performance for that trait. So with a raw weaning weight, we're just actually looking at the actual weight of that calf on the day that he was weaned, whereas adjusted weaning weights is the expected weaning weight of the calves at a constant age, usually either 200 or 205 days, after adjusting for other factors that influence growth, like the sex of the calf, the dam age, and the age at weaning. Typically, it's recommended to use adjusted weights instead of raw weights in your selection decisions because they do compare animals on a more fair basis. But it is important to only compare animals within the same calving season and management. The reason being, if you're looking between different herds, they might be managed differently. One might have a slightly better nutrition program than the other, and that influences the actual phenotypic performance of that group of animals on average. To illustrate the advantage of using adjusted weights, I put together a little example in the next couple of slides. So here we have an imaginary group of 20 bull calves born within the BCRC's recommended calving interval length of 63 days and tagged from the firstborn down here in number 1 to the last born, number 20. So if we start to look at some data, maybe we look at first at birth weights on our bull, the average in this group being 70 pounds. Then maybe we start to look into the weaning weights of the group. In this case, the average weaning weight was 660 pounds, which is, again, the BCRC target benchmark for performance for Eastern Canada. And they were weaned at an average age of 204 days. When you start to look at the numbers on the weaning weights here, calf 1 looks quite good. He has the highest weaning weight of this group. But remember, because he was the first calf, that also means that he had the most time to grow. So we really should look at growth rate instead of the absolute value of that weaning weight. And when we do that, things start to look a little bit different. So the calf born earliest in the season, of course, has a lower average daily gain because he's older at the time of weighing at weaning. And we start to see that some of the later born calves look better than they would just based on their weaning weight because they're being compared more fairly. So now, actually, calf 6 has the highest average daily gain. But there's more to it than that. There's other factors that actually influence growth rate that we should take into consideration. One of them being the age of the dam. So we know that calves from first calf heifers are going to weigh a little bit less because that dam is also still maturing and growing as she's producing and caring for that calf. So there's adjustment factors that we use in order to compare those calves from the heifers fairly to the older animals. And I've tried to represent that by color here. So the heifers are the lighter blue, the 3-year-olds are the in-between color, and then the dark blue represents mature cows. If we take this into consideration, calf 6, while it has the highest average daily gain, is also from a mature cow compared to some of these first calf heifer calves. And when we consider that, actually, in the adjusted weaning weight calculation, calf 12 starts to look a little bit superior in terms of growth rate, a little bit higher adjusted weaning weight because we're appropriately considering the fact that he came from a heifer as opposed to a mature cow. Other data we usually have when making our selection decisions include ultrasound and test traits. So here we have average performance for a group of bulls and the same kind of graphs for ribeye area, grade, and scrotal circumference. With ultrasound, we take an image, which then is used as an indicator for the genetic improvement of carcass quality. Just to give a little bit more detail in terms of what we're actually capturing and what it represents, we take images across the 11th to 13th rib, which is used to estimate the marbling or intermuscular fat of the animal. Just to give you an idea of what this looks like, here I have from the same Angus bull test, the difference between the marbling of the lowest marbled and highest marbled bull calf in that group. So again, born within 60 days, managed the same from birth right to post-weaning, and all Angus. And here's the differences in the data. So this calf with the highest marbling is predicted to be a triple A, whereas the lowest is practically devoid or absent of marbling. And that also translates into intermuscular fat. Like weights, we should use the adjusted values, not the raw values, because fat deposition and musculature growth is influenced by age and weight. One important thing to keep in mind is that carcass quality is related to weight, but it is not a complete predictor, right? So the highest weight one here, the 1,600-pound bull, actually had poorer marbling than a more average-sized bull in the group. And the genetic correlation between IMF, ultrasound, and carcass is about 65 to 75%. So it's a good predictor we can use in our genetic evaluation programs. Similarly, with ribeye area, we take an image of the ribeye and then send it to the lab, where they go and they trace the ribeye. And then we get data back on that. If we compare between the lowest and highest ribeye area here, we have a ribeye area of adjusted for a constant age of 10.9 square inches for the smaller animal and 14.1 for the highest. And the genetic correlation with carcass ribeye area is somewhere between 80 and 90%, so it's very highly correlated. In addition to ultrasound traits at bull test, we also consider a few other traits. So scrotal circumference, which is an indicator trait for fertility. Again, you should use the adjusted age constant values if they're available. And then hip height is an indicator trait for mature size and is correlated to maintenance costs. Although phenotypic performance information is very important and useful in our decision making, we should also take a look at the EPDs. And the reason being that you're actually buying the bull's calf crop performance, not his own performance when you select a bull. So it doesn't matter if he was the heaviest bull calf in the group where he came from. What we really want to know is whether his calves are going to wean heavy or whatever trait it is that we're of interest. And the concept of heritability is why this is important. Heritability is the proportion of variation between individuals that is due to genetics and the environment. And it differs between different traits. So some traits like structure-related, carcass quality, scrotal circumference tend to have a very high genetic component, whereas other traits such as calving ease, milk production, fertility have a lower genetic component. So if we just look at that bull's own phenotype, a lot of the variation between that bull crop might actually be due to the environment or management. In terms of tools we have available for genetic evaluation or for selection decisions, the first one is genetic evaluations, EPDs or ABCs. Genetic evaluation is the best estimate of the genetic merit of an animal for a trait using all available information. It's expressed in trait units. So our growth traits are expressed in pounds, but they're relative to the population average. So if you just look at the EPDs or ABCs by themselves, you can't actually tell whether an animal is above or below average. They adjust performance for non-genetic factors, management, age, breed, and sex, and they account for genetic merit of all recorded relatives. EPDs can be either calculated within a breed or across breeds. At AgSights, we call those across breeds comparisons, or ABCs. When we're looking at GEs, it's important to consider the difference between a direct EPD and a maternal EPD because they're used for two different things. So a direct EPD is the impact of the bull's genetics for a trait on his own calves. So if we have a weaning gain direct EPD of plus 50, that means that calves are expected to weigh 50 more pounds than a bull with an EPD of 0. Whereas the maternal EPD is actually the bull's genetics and their effect on the daughter's calves. So a weaning gain maternal EPD, which is often called milk, of plus 20 means that daughters of the bull are expected to wean calves 20 pounds more than a bull with an EPD of 0. Next up in terms of selection tools are percentile rankings, which is how the animal ranks for the trait compared to others in the population. Typically, a smaller number is better. So a percentile ranking of 1 means that that bull is in the top 1% of the population for that trait. Because they all are oriented the same way, they're simpler to use than EPDs for selection decisions. And you can have separate rankings both within and across breeds. If we take a look at this bull's performance here, some of the strengths that he has is in calving ease, weaning gain, post-weaning gain, and marbling. And some of the weaknesses, maternal birth weight, ribeye area, and scrotal circumference. It's important to note that there's never one perfect bull. There's going to be pluses and minuses to all of them. And that's why it's so important that we understand what we're looking for in a bull when we try and make these decisions. Last selection tool we'll talk about today is a selection index, which is a single value that balances multiple traits to show the overall genetic merit for a specific purpose. Each breed or organization has their own indexes, and they're calculated using models that consider costs and revenue information to help make a decision. They could be expressed in just a numeric value, in dollars, or in some other rankings like stars. And just as an example, walking through quickly what the actual impact of the selection index value is. Biodollar is AgSights' original selection index, which is expressed on what the value that bull will bring in terms of his calves' performance. So a bull with a biodollar of 3,629 is supposed to produce calves that are worth $3,629 more than an average bull. Our new indexes are presented on a star system to really simplify these selection decisions, and there's 3 indexes for 3 different purposes. A 5-star bull is in the top 10% of the population for that trait. And the 3 indexes, one focuses on maternal traits for replacement heifers, one focuses on market calf growth and carcass quality, and one is an overall balanced selection for both growth and carcass that you might use if you have your own calves that you're retaining for farm gate sales. One important concept to consider is that an equal index value does not mean that you have 2 equal bulls. So just to illustrate that concept, I have 2 bulls here that have basically identical biodollars. But if we actually look at the balance of trait EPDs that make up that index, you'll notice some differences between them. While an index does simplify selection decisions to one single value, it is important to consider it kind of as a first stage selection. So narrow down your list to maybe your top 3 or top 5 bulls, and then look at some specific EPDs for traits that you're trying to improve in your herd to make sure that that bull is strong in those traits. The last thing we need to consider is budgeting and value for money when making our selection decisions. So we should evaluate things in terms of the performance of the bull and their expected value to our herd. In this case, just as an example, we have two bulls, one with a price of 5,000, one with a price of 3,000. Market weights here are for the two bulls. Bull B is a little bit heavier, and they both have the same genetic merit for birth weight. But bull A, let's say, has 20 pounds higher EPD for weaning weight. What does that translate in terms of value to our operation? And who would we choose? So there's a little bit of math here, and we do have some spreadsheets. If anyone wants, feel free to reach out. We have some spreadsheets that help you with evaluating this for bulls you're considering. But bull A with that plus 20-pound weaning gain EPD is expected to wean calves 20 pounds heavier than bull B when they're born at the same birth weight. If we breed that bull to 40 cows over 4 years, assuming 95% are weaned, bull A would wean 3,040 more pounds of calf. Now, these numbers are out of date, but assuming, say, a market price of $2.25 per pound, that's an extra $6,840 more value over the life of the bull. Now, we should consider the difference in price because obviously bull A was more expensive. But even so, after subtracting 2,000, that bull B is expected to produce $4,840 more net value to our operation. In terms of actually budgeting for the bulls, I would highly recommend checking out the BCRC's bull valuation calculator. It provides insight into the affordability of bulls for your operation. But do keep in mind it focuses mostly on costs, so it should only be used when comparing bulls that will bring a similar genetic value to your operation. Take-home messages today. So the best way we can improve our herds is by taking advantage of the genetic lift from buying high-quality bulls or potentially using AI bulls on some of our animals. It's important to assess our own operation and know our needs before evaluating bulls. And using the selection tools available will help maximize our genetic progress. And in the end, we should try to focus on the value a bull can bring to the herd, not just the price tag or his own performance when evaluating bulls.